Hi, Jennifer. It's so
Morning.
good to be here with you.
Good to see you too, Eve.
Yeah, it's lovely that you allowed us to have this conversation today. And I would be really curious to maybe start us off with you just introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about your work as a coach.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'm a graduate of Awaken Coach Institute. I have the PCC Professional Coach certification from ICF, and I'm also a Gallup-certified strength coach, which really means that a lot of my work is based on an assessment that helps identify people's natural talents and what we call their strengths. And so I work in 4 different areas. One is I am a career coach and I help people to make career decisions and find jobs, and I help them leverage their strengths. So I call myself a strengths-based career coach. I'm currently writing a book called Creating Your Strengths-Based Career, Navigating Your Journey to an Ideal Job. Title is tentative, but I'm working on that right now. And a couple of years ago, I got to partner with my colleague, Joe Self, on a book called Practical Strengths Career Success. I say those things to say there are some resources that are available now and will be available later to reinforce some of these ideas. And also, that's how passionate I am about this idea. I really think that understanding our strengths, our natural talents, really helps to create careers that we are happy in, that we're more productive in. And when we can explain our strengths in a job search, we can land in positions where people hire us for our strengths and not in spite of them. So that's a big piece of my work. I'm also an executive coach. So leaders, managers who want to work more from their strengths and bring out the strengths in their employees are a great fit for me in working with leaders who want to do that, step into that themselves and bring it to their organizations. I was in higher education for 30 years, so a lot of my clients work in education, but I also work with people in the business and nonprofit worlds and government as well. So in addition to the coaching, I also do mentoring of newer coaches. I started my coaching business about 6 years ago to a great extent, part-time before that, but really pressed into having a business as a coach and a consultant about 6 years ago. And so I love helping newer coaches to figure out, how do you market yourself? How do you make a business out of this? What's your unique promise of value? To use a phrase from my colleague, William Arruda, what's your unique promise of value? And looking through the lens of strengths is a great way to do that too. So strengths-based mentoring for other coaches as well. And then finally, I do team training. So in companies and organizations that want to understand each other better, looking through the lens of strengths helps them and us, all of us, understand what people bring that's different from what you bring and what people need that might be different from what you need. So it's really all about listening better and understanding each other better. So I let strengths color all of the world, all the work that I do.
Wow, yeah, I'm really impressed. I have to say that you've only been a coach since 6 years, because I know what I hear from you and also what I've experienced from you, it's such a broad range and so many people that you already touched with your work. And it seems like the strength part is really like a connecting piece between all those things. And it kind of makes me curious to understand better, because I can sense your excitement also when you talk about these strength profiles. What initially sparked your interest, your curiosity?
Yeah, thanks for
Yes.
asking. Well, and to clarify, I've had a business of coaching for 6 years, but I have been a coach for more than 20 years. So in higher education, I was a career coach, and before that, an advisor. And so I've been coaching people for a long, long, long time. What sparked my interest in strengths was really when I started working on the career aspect of higher education, helping students at the time, undergrad and graduate students. I worked with MBAs and still work with MBAs for a long time. One of my colleagues invited me to a training on Clifton Strengths that used to be called StrengthsFinder, in order to integrate this into our work in the career development space. And it really resonated with me when I first saw it. In fact, when I first saw my own strengths assessment results, I actually thought these are my top 5 weaknesses. And of course they tell me like, these are your top 5 strengths. And I thought, well, I see these as weaknesses. And through the process of coaching and understanding and having more training, I came to understand, okay, if I use these natural talents in a healthy, productive manner, they are strengths. If I overuse them or let them overtake or, fail to see the downside of these natural talents, they can become weaknesses. And that perspective was so powerful for me. I think number one, because I only saw the weakness side. A lot of people, and I myself included, have had people in their lives saying there's a negative side of this natural talent that you bring to the world or your natural way of being in the world. We see a negative side of it, but the work around strengths really helps us to celebrate that natural talent that you have, that natural way of being in the world, and say, what's good about it? So the quote that I love from Don Clifton, who's the founder of the Clifton Strengths Assessment, is what would happen if we celebrate what's right with people instead of what's wrong with people? And so that's what resonated with me years ago, probably, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago, when I first encountered that in higher education. So I started integrating that into my work with students and also into my work even with my own colleagues at the university I was working with at the time. And so then that's just continued to this day.
That's so amazing. And it really resonates with me because I also did this this Clifton Strengths at my old workplace. And I had a similar response. Actually, I was like, is this really my strength? Like I thought, because positivity and empathy are the first 2 of mine. And I had the same with people telling me like, it kind of feels sometimes a little bit superficial because I'm so positive, or I'm so sensitive because of my capacity to empathize with others. So it's really interesting also, to get a different perspective on those. And then even because it's so natural and seems so easy, to acknowledge that it's actually a strength and to be able to, use that and really allow it to be easy also. And I'm wondering, like, what kind of shifts do you notice in your clients when you start working with this framework or when you start working with the strengths training
I'm
events?
so glad you asked. I mean, it is the thing that makes me love this work so much. And it's really about understanding the innate value that people have, that when we understand how we naturally are in the world, and we understand that there's goodness in there, that there's beauty in that, that is something that a lot of people have not been told, or they've been told the opposite. Like you said, you're too empathetic. And so if we're saying things like that to people, it's because we're not seeing the value of that. I'd much rather say, when you ask about my needs, or when you ask about the needs of others, or when you're tuned into the needs of others, Eve, that brings something so special into this space, into our team, into our community, into our conversation. You're bringing a perspective that not everyone has. And I want to encourage people to say, what's the value of that? And so I think when I'm working with one-on-one clients who are discovering their strengths for the first time, it's so often about celebrating something that's been criticized. Now, we still have to use it in a healthy, productive manner. So my number one strength is communication. So if I am still communicating with you about this topic in 5 hours, and our podcast goes 5 hours instead of a shorter time that we've planned, this is not healthy and productive, right? People are long since stopped talking about us. So every strength, every natural talent can be overused. However, it can also be celebrated. So, there were places in my career, places in my life where people were saying, shut up, sit down, and get back in your box, right? Don't share your ideas. I have high ideation too. So communication and ideation, I want to share some ideas. And when I've worked in places that said, be quiet, we don't want to hear from you, get off the phone, stop the meeting, no more conversation, that shuts me down. But when people have said, I believe that you have something valuable to say, I want to hear from you, let's get your ideas into the room. And I can do that in a healthy, productive manner without overpowering everyone else's ideas. That has so much value.
And I can totally see how this podcast is a perfect space for you, actually, because both like your communication and ideation get to have a space in this. And it's really beautiful that you're sharing all your knowledge and expertise on these topics with us today. Yeah. Another thought that came up for me actually was also putting maybe like on the cultural lens, because when you were sharing, I also realized that, for example, in my job interviews, I was asked the question before what my weaknesses are. So I don't even remember if probably they did ask also about my strengths, but it also definitely was asked for my weaknesses. And I'm wondering, like, is that also reflected in your experience as a career coach in the US? Does that show up? And why do you think that, yeah, is
For
important?
sure. Absolutely. And I think whether I'm working with a client from the US or Europe or in, the South Pacific regions or, any of the places that I work with folks, I think it's the same challenge that we want to have some authenticity when we're joining a team. We want the people we're interviewing with to know what we bring, but we also need to have some awareness of when it gets the best of us, or in the sense of like the worst of us, really. Like when are we at our best and when are we at our worst? So when I'm coaching people about the weakness question, I'll explain that I think sometimes the strengths that are at the top of our profiles, the natural talents, really can be our strengths, but sometimes they can be our weaknesses. So I have high maximizers, so I always want to make things better. I always want to make people better. I always want to see the value in people and like bring out the best. But sometimes it means that I'm pushing a little too hard to go a little farther. Let's do a little more. Let's do a little farther. And I need to understand the value of that. Why is being a maximizer helpful as a coach? But also, when does it become too much? And so when I'm coaching someone about interviews, I really want to help them understand the high side and the low side, the help and the hinder of their strengths. So I think to say, hey, I'm a strong communicator, but it's really important that I focus on the listening side of communication, and I work really hard to do that. That's an important nuance, because if I don't listen well, then my communication can become a weakness instead of a strength. I will say the other time then we address weakness is if we look at something like the Clifton Strengths Assessment, or the high five test is another one that will show you not only what's high, but also what's low. There's strengths profile, there's Colby, there's a lot of strengths assessments out there. If you look at what's at the bottom and say, these are the things that don't describe me. For example, I have low discipline. It took me a lot of courage before I could say that publicly. But it's just true. I'm not a very structured person. I'm also low in consistency. So I don't really do the same things every day. That's just true. So is it a weakness? Maybe, maybe not. In some places, it truly, truly is the thing that I just don't have. When I need a system for my business, or I need a system for accounting or bookkeeping, it's really important to have those things in a business. And so not being naturally high in those could be a weakness. But I'm also high in relationship building. And so I have a bookkeeper that I really know, like, and trust. And so knowing that I don't naturally gravitate towards structured, consistent processes, things like accounting are really hard for me. I know that. And so I use my strong relationship building to get a partner in my business who is good at that. And together we're good. The taxes are paid and the bookkeeping is done. But if I don't know that that's not my strength, I won't partner with someone to make up for that fact. So I hope that answers your question on weakness. It's a really rich question.
Yeah, it does. And I think I want to take like a small step back and just allow our listeners to understand a bit better about what the Clifton Strength is about, like what the structure is, how, because we're using a lot of terms that probably not everyone is familiar with. So if you can just give us like a brief insight into how that works.
Absolutely. So yeah, the Clifton Strengths Assessment is the one that I'm trained in and certified in. And the other ones that I mentioned, things like Strengths Profile, Colby, High Five Test, there are other Via Strengths is another one. There are other strengths assessments out there. But specifically, the Clifton Strengths is an online assessment. It's owned by the company called Gallup, which is a huge international consulting firm that does polling and all kinds of things around the world. So it's just one of their products. But it's an online assessment that people can take. You just pay the money for the assessment online and you get your results right away. So you don't have to work with a certified person to get the results. But if you do, you probably understand a little bit more. We talk about you name your strengths, you claim them, and then you aim them. And so coaches that are certified in this can really help people make use of it. So the assessment takes about 30 to 40 minutes. It's online, and it asks us questions. I think there's around 200 questions. And it says, are you more like this or like this? And how much are you like this or like this? So I think there's like 5 places where you can say, I'm all the way on the left here. I'm all the way on the right here. And I think the thing that's really interesting is the 2 statements that you're choosing between are not necessarily opposites. So it might say, do you like to learn or do you like to tell stories? Well, I like both. But I can immediately recognize that I'm a storyteller. And so I'm going to click that, like, I tell stories. I also love to learn. But when I'm thinking about like which statement feels more true, you asked me what time it is. I'm going to explain to you like how to build a clock, right? So, or talk to you about my favorite watch, or, I'm going to just launch into stories. So I can recognize that as that's me, even though I also love to learn. So it's really fascinating. Most people, when they see their results, do resonate with them and say, oh my gosh, it's so interesting. I answered these questions and it came out with this report that really does feel like me. And when people don't resonate, as a coach, I can really say, well, what do you think caused you to check that box? Like, it wasn't a blood test. It wasn't a fingerprint monitor. Like, you chose those answers. So what made you choose empathy again and again and again? What made you choose the questions that indicated you have high positivity again and again? Because you chose those over other things, 200 times. So what is that telling you about yourself? Is really interesting. So it's an online assessment. You get the results right away. You can get a top 5 version. And you also can get what we call the full Clifton Strengths 34, where you see what's high and also what's low. In career coaching and leadership coaching, I find it just as useful to know what's low than also what's high, because the things that are low just don't describe us, which means we've got to partner with people if we need to do those things. Or if we're making decisions, we don't necessarily want to choose roles and jobs that require us to operate from the things that are most naturally not like us.
Yeah, it really also reminded me of like how I felt when I received the assessment. And there were definitely some strengths where I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. I can see myself a lot in that. And then there were other strengths where I was like, is that me? Do I really use this? And also it needed some deeper engagement with it, because it's not just like you look at it and then, as you say, you I don't know the words that you used, but you had these 3 steps and where at the end you aim them.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So how did you come to understand it? Or, now when you look at your results, do you still feel they don't describe you very well? Or where have you evolved in your understanding of that?
I think right now I feel way more comfortable and appreciative of all of them. I think one that really was weird for me in the beginning, or felt weird, was the one of input and individualization, where I was like, it was so hidden underneath, but like for other people it was totally obvious. They like, yeah, obviously you can easily tell what this one person is good at and what the other person needs. And I was like, I didn't even know that other people are not doing that to the degree that I'm doing that. So it was so natural. And I think that happens for many people. And that's why I find it so valuable to be taking these kind of assessments and to be engaging with your strength more, because we tend to, because it's easy for us, project that onto the world and think, yeah, that's just the normal. That's just how everybody does it. So that was definitely
so important. I mean, that is probably the root of so much misunderstanding in workplaces, in families, between, partner relationships, like believing that everyone operates the same way you do is really what we miss about each other, right? So if I know that you have high input and you are going to want to get a lot more information about something, that means that I can partner with you when I'm in a situation where I need more information. So input is not one of my highest strengths. So sometimes if I get too much information, I'm a little overwhelmed by it. But for example, I have a resume writer on my team in my business, and she has high input. And so where I might want to say to a client, hey, if we're doing your resume, can you just like tell me the really important things and like leave out the extra stuff? My resume writer, Eva, will say, tell me everything, bring me everything, like give me everything. And so I think that's really important to understand the value of that. And I don't even know if she realizes how important I think that is. My other resume writer, Kara, I think has the same strength. And so I'm realizing, oh, I really need that on my team because I get a little overwhelmed with too much information and neither of them do. And so I see the value of it. But if you don't realize that people like me don't naturally do that, you won't see the value that you bring.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would be really curious from your experience also with working with teams, because for me, it was also part of like me onboarding into this team and us being like more aware of each other's strengths so that we could rely on each other in different situations, how you just described it, and that we don't have the need to figure it all out by ourselves or do all the tasks that we don't actually like to do when there is a person that actually finds like real joy and is like, yeah. So can you speak a little bit more to the team dynamics? Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand what you just said is really the key for teams, is understanding that I don't have to be all things. I think we're often raised that we have to be quote unquote well-rounded. And when we realize we're not, that can be really unsettling for people. But actually, when I'm working with teams, I'll put a quote up on the slide that says, people don't need to be well-rounded, but teams do need to be well-rounded. So if I know that I've got to do some research or gather more information than I feel led to do, but I know that I'm partnering with you and you're going to bring much more information with your high natural input, I can understand that that's a really good partnership for me. And so knowing what we bring and what others bring is really, really important. And I think we often believe that everyone has the same talent. So for example, I have communication number one. So it means, you can ask me a question, I can probably think of an answer on the fly, but that is not true about everyone. I literally don't know what I'm thinking unless I talk it out. And lots of people need to think before they talk. So if I think that everyone is like me, I won't realize how difficult things like job interviews are, because it's easier for me to think on my feet. But if I don't realize that a lot of my clients need time to think, need time to plan, I won't get them ready for that interview effectively. So we do a lot of planning. We do a lot of practicing of the stories, because I know that not everybody naturally can just, answer on the fly. So I think what you're saying is very important. In teams, we kind of walk through the world assuming people are like us, and then we're frustrated when people aren't. And what I really try to teach people on teams is how to understand what you bring and understand what someone else brings, and also understand what you need and understand what other people need, and try to partner well and appreciate the differences.
So interesting what you're sharing. And I have like a million pathways to go down with this. I think what I would be interested most is imagining that there is this person that just received their Clifton Strength results and they're coming to you and they want to, just get more awareness on what this meaningful career could look like for them. Like, how can you take us a little bit into the process of like how does this work? How are you engaging with
Yeah.
them?
Thanks for asking. I mean, there's so much complexity to career development, but the place I always start with people is to say, when you see these top 5 strengths or top 10 or whatever results you've gotten, what does it mean to you? So we talk about name it, claim it, aim it. What does it mean to you that you got empathy? What does that mean to you that you got positivity? What does that mean to you that you got input? Just name it, okay? And how do you claim it? Where do you see it? What does it mean to you? And then what does it allow you to do? So I always give my clients a reflection worksheet and then talk through on one of our first calls. What does it mean to you? And what does it allow you to do? How is this good? How is it a strength? How is it helpful to people around you? We can talk later about how it's perceived or when you overuse it. But I think starting from a place of how does this bring value to the world? That's a really important piece. When we think about using it for career development, where I go next is saying, okay, when you think about your current work or your current school or your past jobs or wherever you are, where did you get to use that strength? And where are you not getting to use it? So I have communication, number one. So if I'm in a job where I'm alone with spreadsheets, not communicating with anyone, I'm going to reflect on the fact that that kind of job doesn't leverage my natural talent of communication. And so the likelihood that I'm going to be disengaged because I don't get to use this thing that's come so naturally to me is really high. And that's true for most people. So people that are high analytical, I'll say, what does it mean that you're analytical? They say, oh, I ask questions. I look at pros and cons. I evaluate nuances of things. And then I say, what does that allow you to do? Well, in a meeting, I get the background and I look at the data and I want to evaluate the data and I want to see the metrics. And they talk about what it means that they're analytical. And then I'll ask them, how much of that are you getting to do in your current job? And most people that are disengaged, I mean, when people call me as a career coach, I mean, I always say, no one calls me on their best day. Like something's going on if you're paying me money to get out of your job, right? So when I ask them to reflect on how much are you able to use that, they'll tell me about a boss that doesn't want them to ask questions, or a workplace that doesn't give them access to data, or a team that isn't open to their questions and their analysis, or a situation where they're prevented from engaging in that line of questioning. And so you can just hear it like, I have this talent and I don't get to use it. It is the chief reason people are disengaged. And so the career development process I take people through is really to say, what kind of change would need to happen in your career for you to be able to step into your strength? For some people, they're just in the wrong role. They're in a role that just doesn't fully utilize their talent. So let's say somebody is on the, they're an engineer and they're creating designs, but they don't get to do the analysis that they wish they could. Someone else is doing that and they're not able to do it. If they can get that promotion and they can get to that role that does more of the analysis, that's going to be better for them. So sometimes it's a really small change. Sometimes people can do something I call, lots of people call job crafting. When I was on a team at my most recent university, whenever strangers would come and tour the college, they would often say, hey, Jennifer, can you do your woo thing? I have woo in communication. So I love meeting strangers and I love to welcome people. And I have positivity too, like you, Eve. And so they would say, hey, can you go do your woo thing with these strangers who are visiting and give them a tour? And I loved it. So it wasn't so much that I needed a different job. It was just like, hey, just give me a chance to do that. Like I was always the MC when we had the open house for the college, that was a good role for me. And I had colleagues that dreaded that. They didn't want to give the tours. They didn't want to, be the MC. So sometimes it's just doing a little bit more of what comes naturally to you. Sometimes it's changing a role, but sometimes it's changing a company or changing an industry. So, I worked with someone who was really high competition and they worked for an organization that was related to sports, and the organization they were working for, they weren't really very good at the sports. I mean, the organization they were working for wasn't winning very often. And it was so frustrating to this person because they wanted to win, and they were working on the marketing and promotion side of that. And they kept promoting a team that wasn't winning very much. And it was just so frustrating to them. So for them, getting to an organization where the team was winning more, it was a more competitive team, that was a better fit. So I think that seeing our strengths and understanding our strengths can give us a lot of information about the kinds of changes that we can make in our careers that make things better. I'll tell one more story right now, and then I'm sure.
Please. That's very interesting. Please go ahead.
Thinking about someone who said, I need to get a different job. I need to leave my company. And his number one strength was relator. And I said, tell me about the close relationships you have with others in your work. And he went on to say that his mentor had recently left the company. And since his mentor had left the company, he did not have a close relationship at work. And so his thought was, I have to leave my company. But when we looked through the lens of strengths and understood how important relators want long-standing, deep connections, that's one of my top 10 too. They want to know people for a long time. They want to go deep with a smaller number of people. It's not about lots of strangers. It's about long-standing connections. Once he understood that and reflected on how impactful it was that his mentor left the organization, he really understood that that's what was missing. And so we went through a process of saying, where else could you find it? Who else could you connect with? Could you mentor someone else? He was in an MBA program. And so he realized there were professors and classmates that he could connect with that he hadn't connected with. And there were actually some other potential mentors in his company that he really hadn't tapped into. And he realized some people had reached out to him that he hadn't gotten back to. And I'll tell you what, Eve, in an hour conversation, he came to understand that there was a whole bunch of potential for him to meet that need for close relationship in other ways than leaving the company, and that leaving the company wasn't the only option. It's really powerful stuff.
It's so inspiring also, and shows that's my general experience with coaching, in how few time you sometimes get to shift your perspective in such a massive way that you're literally coming out and you're like, how did this happen? How did I not see this before? So it's really powerful. I can hear that from your sharing. And it also sounds like once you are aware of your strength and you're able to embody them and use them in your workplace and have this awareness, that your work just gets to be more easy, more fun, you have more engagement. So yeah, I can see a lot of value in actually being really diving deeper into this topic. And from a previous conversation, I remember that you shared also that the course that you took at Awaken to some degree also shifted your work with working with strength. So I would be really curious if you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I was a Gallup-certified strengths coach for many years and a coach in university setting for many years, and even doing some private career coaching before I came to Awaken. But when I did the Awaken Coach Institute coaching certification, I learned how to ask better questions and more questions. So I think, especially in the career coaching space, a lot of it is a little bit more consulting. And even in the higher ed space, I was an advisor before I was a career coach. And even my title was career counselor, though I don't have a counseling degree. There's a lot of telling. And also I taught for many years. I taught career development. I taught study skills. I taught survival skills for college students. So there was a lot of teaching and telling. So what I really learned to focus on when I came to Awaken Coach Institute and did the coaching training was how to ask better questions. So specifically how I relate that to the strengths now is so exciting to me. So when I know, for example, that someone has a high futuristic strength, then when I think about asking good questions, I don't want to focus my questioning on what happened in the past. I want to ask this person who naturally thinks into the future, maybe even more than others, to imagine if they make this decision, what could it potentially lead to? Or imagine yourself in this new scenario. What do you see? What do you envision? What do you imagine? If you think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, what could this decision today potentially lead you to? That's a great line of questioning for someone who has high futuristic. Whereas someone who has high context, for example, which is really looking to the past and looking for what information can you gather from the past that informs a decision today, I might ask better questions knowing this person has high context. If I ask them to think about what information that they've learned in the past that informs the decision today, what information do they have about what else is happening around them that makes a certain decision make more sense? Or I guess I'm going to say the same thing, that it informs their decision in a different way. Knowing how this person in front of me is wired is super helpful. People that have high strategic, they like to focus on a goal and they want to see multiple paths to that goal. So that's very different than someone with high focus. Someone with high focus really wants to kind of have like one track that they're staying on, where someone with high strategic is going to look at multiple paths to that goal. So if I know that, then my questions can be different. What do you want to focus on? What is your priority? Right now, when you think about where you want to spend your time, what's most important to stay on track with? These are great questions for someone with high focus, but someone with high strategic, I might want to ask, what are all the options you're considering? How do you recognize the pattern in the options you look at? How do you decide what's the best path when you can naturally see lots of paths? Those are better questions for strategic people. So I'm so grateful to Awaken Coach Institute that I learned to focus on the questions more, but I'm also really grateful for my strengths-based training, that it helps me understand the nuances of the person I'm coaching so that I can ask questions that are more specifically helpful to them.
Oh, that sounds really powerful, and actually got me really excited because it really plays also into my strengths of individualization, where it's like, it seems like you're really able to enter into the world of the other person, and you get to choose the questions that really allow them to use their strength to open up to different perspectives and to play around and to really find the solutions that are, it just sounds like the questions land in a very different way if they're so customized and individualized to the person that you're talking to.
That's the hope, right? That's the hope. And it's an art, we can go to coaching training and we can learn certain coaching models and we can learn different diagrams of things. And of course, as coaches, we're, always thinking in our mind, what will be most helpful here. But I think knowing who the person is, make my coaching less predictable in a lot of ways, even though I do have a process that I take people through in career development or in leadership development or in any kind of strengths development. I think knowing that if someone is working within their strengths, they're going to make more progress. I think about that with job search, as a person with, communication, woo, positivity, in relator, like I'm pretty people focused. And so I think the whole world revolves on networking. But if someone is working with me and they're a job seeker who has high input, intellection, learner, context, analytical, really, if I can ask them, what are they researching? What are they learning? How can they learn more? What are their questions? What do they want to learn about a career field they're considering? It may not initially be about networking. I get information from people because I'm such a relationship-oriented person. That's a great way for me to learn. But someone who isn't as naturally geared toward the relationship building as the driver in their strength might much more rather listen to a podcast or read or look at an article or gather some research from the library or some other source. That's going to allow them to make more progress. So not telling people to be me, but telling people to be them. That's really...
Yeah, it really connects also with like what I learned in NLP, which is like also focusing the questions and being very sensitive to the way people express in terms of like what reference system do they use? Are they more visual? Are they more auditory? Are they more kinesthetic? And really adapting also to the way that they express, because it also allows them to receive the question in a very different way and to just get it's more easily, and to be able to feel understood also and seen. So I can imagine it has a similar impact on your clients, that they also, through you really tuning into their strengths, allows them to feel seen and understood on a way deeper level.
I love that you mentioned that, because I think with NLP, it's all about listening to the words people are saying. You don't always have someone's like strengths assessment results in front of you when you're talking with them or when you're coaching them. And certainly in workplaces that haven't done this work, they don't have that. But you can listen for some patterns. You can notice, is this a person who's talking more about thinking and research and gathering information? Is this a person who's more focused on people and feelings and teamwork and meeting the needs of others? Is this a person who's more thinking about, big impact, outward impact, messaging, outward marketing, speaking, influencing, trying to be influential? Or is this a person who's much more focused on the tasks at hand, the structure, the processes, the details? If you just think of even those broad categories and you listen for it, you can hear someone saying things like, I need to know what to do. I need to know what the deadline is. I want you to give me a list. I want to understand the steps. And so if you can tune into somebody saying that, you can understand that they're probably a more executing focused person. And so me saying, well, here's the theory. Well, here's the background. Well, here's 14 people you should talk to. And they're like, oh my gosh, can you just give me a list of things I need to do and tell me when I need to do them? So we have to listen for what people gravitate toward. And if we do, we can be more effective in coaching them.
Yeah, really exciting. I wonder if you would be up for diving into a little demo and just like seeing how to make this topic maybe a little bit more tangible even for our listeners. Would you be up for that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so because I had this thought of something that has been coming up for me recently, which is that I really would love to be more confident with just standing in my power, because I know I have a lot of strength, but I tend to, in different settings, just consciously, but sometimes also subconsciously, reducing my power or weakening myself in front of others so that they don't feel scared or that I'm too much. And I think it also connects to what I'm experiencing or what I had experienced in the past with my strengths of positivity, where I'm just, because I'm optimistic and I can turn challenges into, this is, or problems into challenges, where I'm like, okay, this is how I do it. This is why this comes to me, where it sometimes gets interpreted as my life is so easy and I never have any issues. And I think that creates also this tendency of me thinking that I need to share in a different way, or that I need to, not really show my strength. So I wonder, like, what kind of questions, come up for you hearing that?
Yeah. So I hear you saying that you said the word stand in my power in using my strength. What would the result of that be for people around you if you were more effective at doing that?
I think it would actually allow me to be way more, what would it allow me? Question. To feel more authentic, to feel more that like the way that I am is actually fine, and I don't need to pretend or adapt myself, because I also have a high strength in adaptability. And I think it would also allow other people to be more authentic as well. Because from my experience, if I cannot be authentic, it also doesn't create the allowance on the other side for the other person.
So you shared that you have strengths of positivity and empathy. So I'm curious about how your positivity helps people.
It usually helps a lot when there is some kind of crisis and people feel lost or overwhelmed. And it doesn't mean like I get overwhelmed as well. But the positivity really helps me to come back to a more resilient state where I'm like, okay, this is what happens and this is how we can grow with that. And it allows me to take action when instead other people might freeze and might just stay stuck in that place. And through my trust also and the vision that I create, it allows people to get excited and move forward with me and find some kind of solution, even if it's not the perfect thing. It gets us moving. Yes.
Beautiful. So when does it not meet the needs of the people around you? When does positivity become a hindrance and not a help?
Really good question. I think if a person is really having a hard time and they're sharing about that, and I mean, nowadays that I'm a coach, it happens less, but in the past it happened a lot that they didn't feel acknowledged or validated in their experience, because I would be like, okay, I hear you. Here's the solution, or here are possible perspectives. And nowadays I realize that it's very important to have this moment of, it's okay where you're at right now. I totally see you in the struggle, and I have been in those moments as well. It's not that I'm like, have it all figured out. And so like allowing this moment of just stillness before we move into some kind of, okay, and now let's see how we can move forward, feels really important, because makes people feel more seen and heard.
How did you notice, even in that description, you're still using your positivity, but you're not using it in a way that is hindering people?
Yeah, I think I'm still focusing very much on like it feels more differentiated. It feels more like it has its place, and like the way that I describe it is more can you repeat the question? I think I need to
Yeah,
re-listen to it.
better question. How can positivity that's just going to come out of you naturally be aimed in an empathetic way, where it's not this Pollyanna, like everything's fine when everything is not fine, but that you are celebrating the uncertainty, or you're finding something positive in the waiting, or you're finding something positive in the processing, or imagining if someone's in a grief or something like that, that your positivity can just hold the space rather than pushing to be something. It's this dance between positivity and empathy. So I think what I want to ask you is, how do you use your positivity in a way that is productive and empathetic in difficult times?
Yeah, I think, as you described, I think I wasn't aware of that before you mentioned it, but I think it really nowadays, because I've created more acceptance within myself for these different emotional states, that my positivity really allows me to see the power of each emotion, because it's like every emotion has its own message, it has its purpose. And as much as it might create discomfort or confusion sometimes, if we are able to stay with it and just witness it and listen to it, there is so much beauty that can come out of it. And I can see now that you're reflecting this back to me, how my positivity really helped me to turn this around, which often happens for me when I use my positivity. It's like, this is the initial situation, and then it kicks in and it just helps me to reframe the situation in a way that allows for expansion rather than contraction.
Yeah. So your initial question was, how can I stand in my power and not just shrink back? So how does understanding that positivity is driving you in so many ways, but empathy is also driving you, allow you to see the help and the hinder of that and use that in a powerful way?
Yeah, I guess it's also maybe reframing what standing in my power means. Like, it's not something it kind of in the past felt more like I'm taking away from others, because through me standing in my power, they might feel blah, 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 like this or that. Whereas if I really listen to myself, also what I've shared and what I experience in my life is that I often use my strengths to empower other people and to be empathetic, but to allow them to create more compassion with themselves and to see problems more as challenges that they're actually capable of taking on and moving through and gaining strength from.
Yeah, I love that word empower, because so much of positivity is encouragement. And I can see you, as you describe that dance between positivity and empathy, really helping people to celebrate wherever they are and to embrace wherever they are and to feel empowered and encouraged wherever they are, not just if they're on the top of the mountain. Like, wherever you are on your journey, let's be there, hold space for it, and find the positive in going through this process. It's really special to hear you talk about that.
It's also really special to be allowed to receive that from you, because I can tell from my body response also how just this few minutes of talking about it and being allowed the space and you really connecting to my strengths, I just feel very seen. And it feels like, and I can imagine that this is also the impact that the working with strengths in general has, that it just creates this confidence. It creates this movement that is like, yes, that's who I am and that's what I'm gifted with. And this is how I can share this with the world and make a contribution that is really beautiful and that allows others to rise with me. So thank you for letting me have that experience.
It's so exciting when we realize, the strengths assessments just help you see in writing the things that naturally drive you. And it's really powerful to have that information. And so the point of doing a strengths assessment or getting strengths-based coaching isn't to deny our strengths or try to change them. People ask me that all the time, like, how do I get what's at the bottom to be at the top? It's more to say, I understand that this is what drives me, and that's what I have to use. And so if something being low for me is causing a challenge, how do I use what's high to accomplish what I need to, rather than just trying to be a different person than I am? And if we all had that attitude that, like, what's the genius that you bring? What's the value that you bring? And how do I support you in being you? And how do you support me in being me? Our teams are stronger, our workplaces are better, our relationships are better. And as coaches, we can help people to feel empowered to be the best version of themselves and not to feel the pressure that they need to be someone else.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And it connects really well to the question that we ask our guests as last when they come to our podcast, which is, how would the world be different if people would more embody their strength, and how does your work contribute to that?
Yeah, I think it's about knowing your own strengths, but also being curious about others and asking questions and learning to listen. And if we walk through the world assuming everyone is like us, we will be very frustrated when people are not doing that very well. But if we walk through the world understanding what we bring and understanding both the help and the hinder of that, and the dance of that, like, this is what drives me, and how do I use it in a healthy, productive manner? And I make space for others and I understand what drives them, and I make room for them to use their strengths and talents in a healthy, productive manner. We can just strengthen the fabric of our relationships at work, at home, in community. Really, if we were all the same, it would really not work very well. It's really in our differences and the different perspectives, the different places we come from that makes us stronger. So in my work, of course, I'm always working with an individual or a team who is committed to doing that. It's why people come to me. I'm always going to look through this strengths-based lens. But when you look through that lens, you can see the value in yourself and step into your own value in healthy, productive ways, but you can also see the value of others. And that's really the magic of it.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you would love to share before we end today's conversation?
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm a grateful graduate of Awaken Coach Institute. And so I'm really so thankful that I did the coaching training, and I'm happy to connect with folks who are curious about strengths-based coaching, either as a client or as a coach who's interested, or, someone in a workplace. So happy to, connect. My website is communicatingstrengths.com. If someone's looking to reach me, I'm always happy to share or connect. I have communication connectedness. So, please reach out. Thank you, Eve, for the really wonderful conversation today. And I'm excited to watch you step into your positivity even more.
Thank you so much. And I just also want to share that you're such a valuable member to our community. And I don't know if you knew that actually, but your event that you hosted last year was one of our most successful events, like most engagement, many people participated. So we would definitely love to host you again and have another session for our community. So if you're up for that, you're happily invited. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank
Well, that was
you.
all about space questions. So, my favorite topic. So thanks for the gift of your time and for listening and asking such thoughtful questions.
Yes, thank you.